I'm Kerrigan Cleveringa.
I'm Elizabeth Gadberry.
Megan Kelderman.
Rachel Stratton.
And Jennifer Wilson.
And our subject was How Moral Are You? So our primary source was Kohlberg, and our secondary source was Haack.
So this is one of the questions that was posed to the subjects of the study. In Europe, a woman was near death from a special kind of cancer. There was one drug that the doctors thought might save her. It was a form of radium that that the druggist was charging 10 times what the drug cost him to make. He paid $200 for the radium and charged $2,000 for a small dose of the drug. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, went to everyone he knew to borrow the money, but he could only get together about $1,000, which is half of what it cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked him to sell it to him cheaper or let him pay it back later. But the druggist said, "No, I discovered the drug and I'm going to make money from it." So Heinz got desperate and broke into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. Should the husband have done that? So keep your answer in mind and we'll get back to it in the results.
Okay, so some of the questions Kohlberg was trying to answer through this was, how does the amoral infant become capable of moral reasoning? So like, how does a little baby who doesn't think as much grow into...
Are you having trouble with your power? No, that wasn't. Okay.
adults who think like we do and have thoughts and moral judgments? And do people go through different stages of moral reasoning as they grow older? So this study is important to us because as we come to know like how morals are developed, then we will be better able to understand like our friends and our peers and like even kids that will have to help someday. And by understanding how it develops, we'll better be able to understand why people make the choices they do in this world. Kohlberg's hypothesis was, using the work of Piaget, he hypothesized that the ability for humans to make moral judgments develops in a predictable way during childhood and adolescence, and he also believed that this happened in specific stages, and that was similar to Piaget's stages of intellectual development.
So how does this relate to class? In class, we just recently learned, and specifically in Chapter 10, how Piaget had two steps of moral reasoning process, the moral realism and moral relativism. Kohlberg then decided to expand on those ideas in his theory that would help figure out how moral reasoning actually was developed. Also in previous chapters, we learned how behaviorists believe that we learn through rules of society, basically through punishment, and we learn moral values through external sources. And Kohlberg wanted to figure out if that was the case or if we actually learned through innate sources and things were put on our heart from when we were born, was just as important in learning moral reasoning.
Okay, so the design of Kohlberg's study, he used an interview, and during this interview, it lasted an extensive 2 hours long, and he proposed dilemmas to the boys. He used this because he wanted to present the 10 hypothetical dilemmas to the children, and he wanted to see what their motive was. So why they said it, were they going to be punished, was it right or wrong, good or bad, and the drive for what their answers actually were. And going off of that, the design continued. They were also looking at the rights and motivations of what these children, boys, were doing. And this actually turns out to be the thing that correlated into the 6 stages. Going off of that, they went into the study looking for stages of development, but they actually found that there were 6 stages of development that worked in dimensions of stages of moral thinking. There's also a really wide range of answers for each child. So the lowest number that a child had was 50, and the highest number that a child had was 150. So one of the major parts of this study is who participated and why were they chosen. So there was a group of 72 boys living in the Chicago suburbs that were chosen of ages 10, 13, and 16. Half of each group was of upper middle class socioeconomic status, and the second half was of lower middle class socioeconomic status. All of these groups were comparable in IQ. Also, as a group, they had a group of delinquents, and these delinquents were age 16 And there was also a group of 24 6-year-olds and 50 boys who were age 13 who were residing in Boston. And the reason why Colbert picked these boys was because they were really just a random sample of children that he wanted to use for the interview process.
So something that's really important to keep in mind during this study is that it's not an experiment, so that means that there is no independent variable and that there is no dependent variable. So the procedure that was used, as mentioned, this was a 2-hour, very extensive interview that covered 10 hypothetical moral dilemmas, and all of these dilemmas had to deal with obedience to legal and social rules versus the need and welfare of others. This was an open interview, so the interviewers could ask questions based off what the children said, probing their choices and figuring out and really getting to the bottom of their morality. There were 30 different general aspects of morality that were brought up in these interviews and that were brought into the children's thinking, and they included concepts of rights, justice, and consequences of actions. Each boy expressed within 50 to 150 moral ideas within their interview, and these ideas were placed in a classification system. This classification system, which had 30 dimensions and consisted of 6 levels per dimension, were used to assign the moral levels for each boy. Another one of the dilemmas that the interviewers asked the boys during the study was, Joe's father promised he can go to camp if he earned the $50 for it. And then he changed his mind and asked Joe to give him the money he had earned. Joe lied and said that he had only earned $10 and went to camp using the other $40 that he made. Before he went, he told his younger brother Alex about the money and about lying to their father. Should Alex tell their father? So pay attention to what your answers are to these, so then you can figure out what your moral reasoning is later in the results.
Okay, so in the results we have 3 specific levels: the pre-conventional level, the conventional level, and then the post-conventional level. And then under each level we have 2 stages in each. And then based off the graph, I'll kind of explain them better. So just a little side note, the 7-year-old group of boys was just acquired from an additional group of 12. So it's just to give us like more data and like to really show that, especially in the early levels, like the early stages, level 1 is definitely more dominant. As basically as they get older, they're gonna move or should move up a little bit in the levels. So in the first level, the pre-conventional level, it's judgments based on what is positive or negative for the person. So stage 1 is called the punishment and obedience orientation stage. And in that stage, the boys could relate punishment to determine what was right or wrong for them. They wouldn't want to do things if they knew that they were going to get punished. And clearly, like from these graphs, like especially at age 7, level 1 was the highest, and even as we go on with level or age 10, stage 1 and stage 2, the first level is predominantly higher than the next levels. So then stage 2 is like the what's best for me stage. The boys would follow rules when doing so for their own personal interest. They have very little sense of obligation in this stage, and they kind of believe like, if you help me, then I will help you, but otherwise they're not going to. There's still adults that are in this stage, and if you know anybody that only will do things to benefit themselves, they're obviously still stuck in stage 2, level 1. So our second level is the conventional level, which is the way most adolescents and adults think, and the rules and norms of the group are most usually followed. Stage 3 is being good and being approved by others. Under this stage, the boys consider themselves moral when they're living in ways that fit the expectations of their family and in other important social groups, and they're really starting to develop like a sense of helping others and that. So then in stage 4 is the law and order stage. Moral actions are defined by society. One should fulfill the duties that one has agreed to and upholds the laws except in extreme cases. Under this stage, they're showing more and more respect for authority, and according to our graphs, like age 10, they're still basically in level 1, but they're starting to show level 2. And then in age 13, level 1 has and age 16. Level 1 has basically died off. And for the most part, in age 13, we can see that level 2 is mostly used, and even still in age 16, level 2 is used. So level 3, which is the post-conventional level, is personal authority emerges, and person makes choices and judgments based off chosen principles or universal principles. Stage 5 is the social contract or an individual rights stage. Under this stage, it said that the acceptance of basic absolute values such as the importance of each person, life and liberty, is kind of what determines their good. And in this level, it's the greatest good for the greatest number. They're really trying to help each other out and have moved kind of beyond themselves. And then stage 6, the universal ethical principles. Few people ever reach this level because it involves balancing an equally valid but conflicting moral principles against one another for specific issues. It's a matter of individual philosophy. There's not very many people that are said to have ever reached this stage in moral thinking, but a few would be like Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., and Gandhi. And as we could definitely see from our graphs, like the numbers in stage 3 are definitely significantly lower than all our previous levels.
So some more results that Kohlberg predicted when he was going into the study that they would find stages of moral development, and that's exactly what they found. They found 6 stages of moral development. They discovered that a child starts out at the first level and can move up to the 3rd level, though that's not always what happens. Some people get stuck at the lower levels and they never develop to the 3rd level. As they go up the levels, knowledge and their moral thought isn't added onto the previous level. It's completely changed and to their higher level thinking. It doesn't apply to their lower level thinking anymore.
So some other studies that were based off of Kohlberg's works. There have been a number of studies that were done after Kohlberg's initial theory was released. One of such studies looked at different stages of moral reasoning in non-Western cultures. The evidence that they found is that people did progress through all of Kohlberg's stages as predicted, but there was also extra stages that Kohlberg hadn't even thought about. Specifically, the extra moral reasoning was based on the welfare of the community. This is a result of being more of a collectivist community rather than an individualist community. Another study that was done after Kohlberg's initial theory looked at how males and females interpret moral reasoning differently. One of the main differences that the researcher Carol Gilligan found was that women's morality rests more in care orientation. So basically what she was saying is that women are more interested in the interpersonal relationship, and men look at more logical explanations when looking at moral reasoning. After Gilligan came out with her conclusions, others looked into her research and found that there were some discrepancies because Gilligan the questions that Gilligan used were personal, and personal dilemmas made for more personal answers. So the researchers found that if men were faced with the same personal moral dilemmas, they responded the same as women do. So Carol Gilligan's research was not upheld. Some limitations of the study. Kohlberg's study only looked at young boys developing moral judgments to develop the stage theory. It didn't look at girls. And then once Kohlberg developed his stage theory, he or others could have set up a longitudinal study to see how the boys' moral developments, their individual moral developments, change over time. Kohlberg, we later found out, couldn't do the study because he died shortly after it. And this study only looked at one culture. Eventually, as I said before, it was expanded on by others, and it looked at the different non-Western cultures. Some suggestions to the class for daily application. We said that you could learn from other people's moral judgments that have been made. You don't necessarily have to experience the moral dilemma, but rather look at what other people have interpreted from it. Be able to understand what point of view kids are seeing the moral dilemma from when reasoning. And once you see what stage they're in, and you can help them interpret the dilemma and figure out how to move up within the stages. And finally, learn to think less for yourself and more for others. So as you become less egocentric, the better your moral reasoning becomes, so then you personally can move up in the stages that Kohlberg presented. So any questions or comments on Kohlberg's study of the development of morality?